Imagine your worst nightmare unfolding on a stage under blinding lights, with thousands of strangers laughing at your pain. That was my reality at the Tech Wave conference in downtown Seattle, where my own brother, James Carter, turned my dream into a cruel joke. I'm Emily Carter, and if you've ever been betrayed by those you love most, stay with me. This story will spark something deep inside you. Picture it: a magnificent hall, crystal chandeliers glimmering, and a sea of CEOs and investors in sharp suits clapping as James accepts the Entrepreneur of the Year award. I'm at the back, heart pounding with pride, clutching a USB with my startup's latest AI demo, a gift I spent weeks preparing for him. I thought we were family. I thought he'd be proud. Then James grabs the mic, his smile sharp as a blade, and says, "My sister Emily should sell her failing startup to me before it goes bankrupt." The room bursts into laughter, thousands of voices cutting into my heart like knives. My hands shake. The USB drops to the floor. I came to support him, wearing my best dress, believing we were close. But in that moment, James didn't just mock me, he erased me. Have you ever felt your whole world collapse in front of you when the one meant to protect you is the one who hurts you deepest? I could have broken down. I could have run. But standing there, their laughter echoing, something inside me changed. They didn't know I'd just signed a $10 million deal for that failing startup. They didn't know I'd been quietly building an empire amidst their scorn. That night, I didn't cry. I walked out, head held high, and swore to rewrite my story, not with words, but with results. James thought he'd crushed me. He was wrong. Stay with me, because this isn't just about revenge. This is how I turned humiliation into a $1 billion empire and rewrote history. Are you ready to see how I do it? Imagine growing up in a house where every glance is fixed on someone else, and you're just a faint shadow on the wall. That's my story, Emily Carter, in the lavish mansion in Bellevue, Washington, that my family called home. But to me, it was nothing but an invisible prison. My father, William Carter, was a renowned Seattle venture capitalist who could turn an idea into gold with a single nod. My brother, James Carter, with his Wharton MBA and a polished smile honed in high-stakes boardrooms, was my father's pride. And me? I was the MIT dropout who dared to dream of an AI education startup to bring knowledge to kids who never had a chance. To my father and James, that dream wasn't a beacon, it was a stain. Have you ever felt like the odd one out in your own family? Every dinner at the Bellevue mansion, I sat quietly, listening to my father recount James's billion-dollar deals, how he won over major investment funds, or the suit he wore to close a contract in downtown Seattle. Those stories never had room for me. One time, I mustered all my courage and brought my AI demo to the dinner table. Lines of code I'd written through sleepless nights, algorithms that could personalize learning for millions of kids. I said, my voice trembling, "Dad, this could change education." William didn't even look up from his wine glass. "Emily," he said, his tone ice cold, "go back to painting or something that suits you. Seattle's no place for pipe dreams." James, sitting across from me, smirked, as if I'd just told a joke not worth laughing out loud. I tried. I really did. I tried to make my father see me, to earn James's respect. Last year, when James was honored at the Tech Wave conference, I spent weeks preparing a special gift, an AI demo integrated with data from his investment fund, my way of saying I was proud of him. I wore my best dress, stood among the crowd in that dazzling Seattle hall, and handed it to him before he took the stage. He glanced at it, shrugged, and said, Cute, Emily, but leave the big stuff to me." Then he stepped onto the podium, and you know what happened next? He turned me into a laughing stock before 1,000 people, calling my startup a failure, calling me someone who needed saving. But the worst pain wasn't the crowd's laughter. It wasn't the pitying looks from strangers in their tailored suits. The worst pain was my father's silence. He stood there, raising his champagne glass, nodding in agreement with James, as if I wasn't worth defending, as if my dream, my effort, wasn't worth a second glance. I left the conference that night not because I gave up, but because I knew I had to find a place where I belonged, a place that didn't need their approval. In a tiny office in Pioneer Square, among whiteboards covered in algorithms and cold cups of coffee, I found it. I built a platform with 150,000 users, a platform that's changing the lives of kids my father and James never noticed. They don't know. And I realized maybe I don't need them to know. Because while they're busy basking in the spotlight, I'm lighting up a world of my own. I walked out of the Tech Wave conference in downtown Seattle, the laughter of 1,000 people still echoing like knife stabs in my mind. That night, the city's biting cold was nothing compared to the pain of being turned into a joke by my brother James in front of the world. But I didn't cry. I didn't turn back to confront James or beg my father, William, to see me differently. Instead, I drove to my small office in Pioneer Square, a cluttered rented room filled with whiteboards scrawled with algorithms, sticky notes plastered on the walls, and a cold cup of coffee next to my old laptop. It wasn't one of those sleek offices in downtown Seattle, but it was where I belonged, where every line of code I wrote was a brick in the dream my family called a failure. Have you ever felt like the whole world was laughing at you, but deep down you knew you held a secret they couldn't see? In that room, I sat down, took a deep breath, and tore the conference invitation James had sent me in half, each word honored guest, now scattered on the floor, like fragments of the trust I once placed in him. I opened my laptop, logged into my startup's backend, and checked the numbers. The screen lit up. 150,000 users, over 500,000 lessons completed by kids in areas my father and James never cared about. And then, an email glowed in my inbox, a $10 million contract with a national education conglomerate signed just hours earlier. They didn't know. Nobody in that dazzling hall knew that my failing startup was profitable, that it was changing lives, that I'd built an empire in the shadows of their contempt. Silence isn't surrender, it's a weapon. While James bragged on stage and my father raised a champagne glass to toast him, I chose to work in quiet. Every late night, every debugged algorithm, every rejected investor call, they were steps I took to prove I didn't need their approval. They thought I'd collapse, that I'd call James begging him to save my startup as he'd proclaimed to 1,000 people. But I didn't call. I didn't need to. Because in that moment, staring at the growth metrics and the contract confirmation email, I realized something. They could laugh, but I was leading. They could mock, but I was winning. My office doesn't have glass doors or ebony desks like James's in Belltown. It has cracks in the walls, a rickety table, and a whiteboard with a scribbled note. Knowledge is a right, not a privilege. That's why I started, not to earn my father's pat on the back or James's nod. I started for the kids no one believed in, just like no one believed in me. That night, I didn't sleep. I wrote more code, called my team, and planned the next steps. Because I knew, tomorrow, when James and my father walked into my office with plans to buy my dream, they wouldn't find a broken girl. They'd find someone who'd forged her sword in silence, ready to fight. and that fight I wouldn't lose. Imagine the moment you've waited for your whole life, when the people who mocked your dream step into your domain, thinking they can seize it with a smile and a piece of paper. That was the moment I, Emily Carter, faced on a Wednesday morning in my small office in Pioneer Square, Seattle. I sat behind my old wooden desk, sunlight streaming through the window onto a whiteboard covered in algorithms. No glass doors or leather chairs like my brother James's office in Belltown, but this was where I forged my empire. And that day, James and my father, William, arrived, striding in like conquerors, entering a kingdom they thought was theirs. The door swung open. James, in a perfectly tailored navy suit, stepped in first, his smug smile practiced through billion-dollar meetings. My father followed, clutching his iPad like a badge of authority, his eyes sweeping the room with the familiar contempt from our Bellevue dinners. They didn't greet me, didn't ask how I was. James just tossed a sheet of paper onto my desk, a so-called buyout offer for my startup, labeled a debt absorption. He spoke, his voice smooth as a rehearsed pitch. Emily, let's make this quick. I'll save your startup, clear your debts, and give you a small equity stake. You stay on for 6 months to hand it over, then take a break. William nodded, sipping from an overpriced to-go coffee. Be grateful, Emily. James is being generous. Have you ever stood before people who thought they could put a price on your dream with a worthless piece of paper? I looked at the offer, no numbers, no accuracy, no understanding of what I'd built. I smiled, not out of fear, but because I was ready. Debt? I said slowly, sliding the paper back across the desk. You mean the profits my startup's been generating for the past 12 months? James blinked, his smile faltering. I opened my laptop and turned the screen toward them. The dashboard glowed. 300,000 users, 400% revenue growth, and a $10 million contract with a national education conglomerate. At the top, a headline from this morning's GeekWire. Emily Carter's AI education startup disrupts industry, secures $10 million deal. Silence. A heavy silence, like the air had been sucked out of the room. William leaned forward, squinting at the screen, as if the truth would vanish if he stared hard enough. Impossible, he muttered. James clenched his fists, his voice tightening. You're making this up. I slid a folder across the desk, a cease and desist letter drafted by my lawyer last night. You publicly offered to buy my startup at TechWave, I said, my voice calm but sharp as a blade. That was an unsolicited, unprofessional move that smeared my reputation. If you or Dad say one more word, I'll sue for intentional interference with business and reputational harm. They said nothing. James looked at my father, William stared at the floor. I stood up and opened the office door. You came to take, I said, my eyes locked on them. But you've walked into the headquarters of an empire you have no right to touch. Now leave like businessmen, or security will escort you out like trespassers. They walked away, James with stiff shoulders, William with his coffee now cold. The door closed, and for the first time I didn't feel small. I felt invincible. The moment the office door closed behind James and my father, William, the air in my small Pioneer Square, Seattle rooms seemed to explode in silence, not with sound, but with the power of a victory that needed no words. I, Emily Carter, had just forced the people who called my startup a failure to leave, empty-handed and speechless. But the story didn't end there. Within hours, all of Seattle, the city that once saw me as my brother's shadow, started buzzing with the name Emily Carter. News of my AI education startup's $10 million deal spread like wildfire. From the sleek offices of Belltown to the crowded coffee shops of Capitol Hill. Forbes ran a headline: Emily Carter, Seattle's future of AI education. Bloomberg dubbed me the woman breaking every barrier in tech. On X, the hashtag #EmilyCarter exploded, with thousands sharing the story of an MIT dropout who made the world turn its head. Have you ever dreamed of the moment the world sees you, not through mockery, but through the light you ignited yourself? That's what I felt sitting in my office, watching emails flood in like a tidal wave. Investors who once dismissed me with polite smiles now sent urgent meeting requests. A Coursera executive who 2 years ago brushed off my call because we need someone with more experience emailed with the subject line, "Congratulations, Emily. Let's collaborate." I read it, smiled, and replied curtly, "Thanks, but I've chosen other partners. Because I don't need people who only show up when the lights are on." I flipped the switch myself, and now they want to stand in my glow. As my news spread, James and my father spiraled into panic. I heard James scrambled to hold a press conference at his Belltown office, trying to reassure investors questioning why he underestimated his sister's startup. My father, always proud of his razor-sharp venture capitalist reputation in Seattle, dodged every interview when reporters called. They thought they could price my dream with a meaningless piece of paper, thought they could write my story their way. But now, that story is mine, and I'm telling it on my terms. I thought back to the early days of my startup when an investor told me, "Emily, let James pitch. You don't have the look of a CEO." Another client called me a dreamer with no grip on reality. Those words kept me up at night, wondering if I truly belonged in Seattle, this cutthroat tech hub. But now, staring at an inbox flooded with over 60 emails from major education organizations, investment funds, and even an invitation to speak at TEDx, I realized something. I didn't need to belong to their world. I built my own, where 300,000 users are learning, where kids in underserved areas get opportunities my father and James never noticed. I'm not just winning, I'm changing the game. And then, an email arrived from an international education organization proposing a partnership to expand my platform to 12 new countries. I read it, my heart racing, not for the money, but for the meaning. My dream, once called a failure, is now reaching millions. I leaned back in my chair, looking out the window where Seattle's sunlight hit the whiteboard with the scrawled words, "Knowledge is a right, not a privilege." They laughed, but I turned their laughter into fuel, and that fire is burning brighter than ever. After my victory in the office, when I forced James and my father, William, to leave empty-handed, I, Emily Carter, thought I'd reclaimed my voice. But in Seattle, where reputation is currency and the spotlight is power, I knew James wouldn't back down. He'd built his career on seeming invincible, and to him, I was still just the failing sister. So when a familiar investor sent me an invitation to James's new investment conference at the Pinnacle in Belltown, my heart skipped a beat. Not because I was invited, I wasn't, but because in the attached documents James claimed to be the co-founder of my AI education startup, declaring that my $10 million success was due to his guidance. James didn't just want to ride my wave of fame, he wanted to steal it. Have you ever felt someone trying to snatch the fire you sweated to ignite, only to claim it as their own? I sat in my Pioneer Square office, staring at James's forged documents, where he brazenly claimed co-ownership of the dream I built through sleepless nights and countless rejections. He planned to use my $10 million deal, my 300,000 users, to woo 300 investors at the Pinnacle, a posh restaurant overlooking Puget Sound, where billion-dollar deals are sealed. I could have let it slide, let him bask in another round of bravado, but this time I didn't stay silent. Silence had been my weapon, but now it was time to act. The Pinnacle wasn't just a restaurant. Its owner, a major hospitality conglomerate, was a partner of my startup. We'd signed a contract to integrate my AI platform into their employee training programs. One phone call was all it took. I reached out to the conglomerate's CEO, calmly explaining that James had falsified documents, violated intellectual property, and smeared my reputation. They didn't hesitate. On Saturday evening, just 3 hours before the conference was set to begin, the Pinnacle canceled James's reservation, citing serious breaches of business ethics. No public explanation, no room for negotiation. Picture the scene: 300 investors in tailored suits and evening gowns, standing awkwardly outside the restaurant's locked doors, while James and his team scrambled to find a backup venue. They ended up at a small hotel on the outskirts of Seattle, with dim lighting and a cramped meeting room, no Puget Sound view or media cameras to capture his moment of glory. The investors who'd flown in from Tokyo and New York whispered about the unprofessionalism. The press called it the investment fiasco of the year. X lit up with mocking posts. James Carter pitches a new fund in a dingy meeting room? Guess his sister's doing better. James, who once called my startup a failure before 1,000 people at TechWave, was now the center of a public collapse. I wasn't there. I didn't need to be. While James struggled to salvage his reputation, I sat in my office checking the numbers. 350,000 new users joined my platform in the past week. An email from an Asian education organization confirmed plans to expand into 5 countries. I looked out the window, Seattle's lights twinkling like stars. They thought they could steal my light, but I snuffed out their spotlight and my fire burns brighter than ever. After James's spotlight was snuffed out at his failed conference at the Pinnacle, I, Emily Carter, felt an odd sense of peace. Not because I'd defeated my brother, but because I realized true victory didn't lie in Seattle's stage lights or newspaper headlines. It was right here in my small Pioneer Square office, where those who believed in my dream helped me build a new world. That night, instead of basking in glory or seeking validation from those who once scorned me, I decided to throw a party at the office. A party for my team, the overlooked, who turned humiliation into an empire with me. Have you ever sat among people who don't need you to prove your worth, who see your light even when the world turns its back? That's what I felt, standing in the office, warm lights glowing over whiteboards scribbled with algorithms and folding chairs circled around an old wooden table. My team was there. Lynn, our lead engineer, once fired for being too stubborn, but who wrote the core code for our AI platform. Min, our product manager, who left a high-paying job to chase an education mission. And Anne, our young intern, who cried when her interface design was accepted, as if it was the first time someone truly listened. No suits or evening gowns, no overpriced champagne, just pizza, soda, and laughter that came from deep in the chest. I stood up, raising a glass of soda, my eyes sweeping over each face. To the ones who don't get invited to the big conferences, I said, my voice trembling with emotion. To those called not good enough, not smart enough, not important enough. To us, too busy building the future to beg for a seat at someone else's table. Everyone raised their glasses, the clink of glass ringing like a declaration. We laughed, sharing stories of rejections, late nights debugging code, and moments when we realized our dream was bigger than any mockery. Lynn told us about the investor who said women don't excel in tech. Min shared how his family called him a dreamer for choosing an uncertain path. Anne, with a radiant smile, said, I never thought I'd belong somewhere like this. Amid the laughter, my phone lit up. A text from my father, William. Emily, we need to talk. This is family business. I glanced at the message, my finger hovering over the screen, then locked the phone. I didn't reply. Not out of anger, but because I'd found my real family. Not in the lavish Bellevue mansion, but right here, among those who believed in me when no one else did. I looked out the window, Seattle's lights flickering like candles. We didn't need chandeliers or grand halls. We had each other, and that was stronger than any fame James or my father ever chased. That night, as we cleared away pizza boxes and soda cans, I realized something. Victory isn't about beating others. It's about building a place where the left behind can rise, where mocked dreams can soar. And I knew, though the road ahead was long, I wasn't walking it alone. The party with my team in our Pioneer Square office gave me something my family never did, a sense of belonging. But in Seattle, where the spotlight never dims, I knew James, my brother, wouldn't let his humiliating failure at the Pinnacle conference be the final word. He sent a text the next morning, short and confident, like a boardroom summons. Emily, meet me at CNBC's Seattle studio, 6 p.m., just us, live interview. CNBC's studio, where billionaires and CEOs share their success stories, was the perfect stage for James to salvage his reputation. But I, Emily Carter, knew he wasn't after reconciliation. He wanted control, like when he called my startup a failure before 1,000 people at TechWave. This time, I wasn't the girl standing quietly in the back row. I was running the show. Have you ever walked into a room knowing someone wants to drag you back into the cage they've kept you in for years? I arrived at the studio on time, wearing a simple black blazer, understated but with eyes that said, I'm not here to negotiate. The studio blazed with stage lights, cameras ready, and James sat there, in a perfectly tailored gray suit, his confident smile rehearsed in front of a mirror. The host introduced us as the Carter siblings, and James started, his voice smooth as a seasoned negotiator. Emily's doing well, really, but moments like a $10 million deal, media buzz, they fade. She needs someone who knows the game, someone who can take her startup to new heights. He paused, looked at me, then continued, his tone lower. Emily, let me lead. Hand over operational control to me. You'll keep your shares, of course. I looked at him, his smile, the studio lights reflecting in his eyes. I could have laughed, but I kept my voice calm, sharp as steel. Lead? You mean like how you led your fund only to crash and burn in a dingy meeting room on the outskirts of Seattle? James clenched his fists, his smile faltering. I pulled out my phone, opened a fresh Business Insider article, its headline flashing on the studio's big screen. Emily Carter's AI education startup valued at $1 billion after new funding round. I slid the phone toward the host, my eyes locked on James. James, you want to lead? Learn to follow me first. Silence gripped the studio. The camera zoomed in on James's stunned face, and the online audience erupted with comments on X. Had Emily Carter just delivered a knockout? The host tried to regain composure, but James couldn't speak. I stood up, my chair scraping lightly on the floor. Ego? I said, my voice steady but echoing through the mic. I was never allowed to have one. You and Dad made sure of that, but now I have vision and I'm keeping my hands on the wheel. I walked out of the studio, leaving James there, alone under the lights, with the truth that I'd surpassed him, not temporarily, but for good. Stepping outside, Seattle's air was crisp, the streetlights twinkling like stars. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. Because while James was still scrambling for the spotlight, I'd already lit up the sky. After walking out of CNBC's Seattle studio, leaving James alone under the stage lights with the truth that I'd surpassed him, I, Emily Carter, felt a new kind of strength. Not the strength of victory, but of freedom. Freedom from the expectations my family had imposed on me for years. But in Seattle, where the shadows of the past don't easily fade, I knew my journey wasn't over. On a Friday afternoon, while reviewing expansion plans for my startup in my Pioneer Square office, my phone buzzed. It was my father, William Carter, with a brief message. "Emily, come to the Bellevue Mansion tonight. I want to talk." William, who once called my dream unrealistic, who stood silent when James humiliated me before 1,000 people at TechWave, now wanted to see me. But I knew this wasn't an invitation. It was a last attempt to pull me back into the cage he'd built. Have you ever faced the person who carved the deepest scars into your heart, only to stand before them now, stripped of their power to hurt you? I arrived at the Bellevue Mansion at sunset, golden orange light spilling over the familiar glass walls and marble floors. William stood in the living room, no longer the imposing figure of Seattle's famed venture capitalist. He wore a simple button-up shirt, hands in his pockets, his eyes scanning me as if searching for the daughter who once bowed to him. He gestured to the sofa, his voice low. "Sit, Emily. I saw the article. Your startup valued at $1 billion. I didn't expect you to go this far." I didn't sit. I stood there, my gaze calm but unyielding, waiting for him to continue. He cleared his throat, sitting down, the leather chair creaking softly. "I saw the CNBC interview," he said, pausing as if choosing his words. "You did well, but I was wrong about you. I want to make things right." Those words, meant to be an apology, rang like an excuse. I stepped closer, my voice steady but sharp as a blade. "You weren't wrong about me. You never knew who I was. You saw me through James's lens, through what you wanted me to be. You called my dream unrealistic, stood silent when James made me a laughingstock, and now you want to make things right? You didn't build me. You only made me build higher, over the walls you put up." Silence fell, broken only by the ticking of a wall clock. William bowed his head, his hands gripping the armrests, flooding the room. "Family?" I said, my eyes locked on him. "I found my family in Pioneer Square, among people who believed in me when you didn't. You don't get to rewrite this story, but you can watch it from afar like everyone else." He stood, his gaze empty, not from anger, but from realizing the truth. I was no longer the girl who needed his approval. I was Emily Carter, who built an empire from the pieces he left behind. I stepped out of the mansion, not looking back. The door closed behind me, and I took a deep breath as if shedding an invisible chain. I looked out at Puget Sound, Seattle's lights twinkling in the distance, reflecting my dream, a dream no longer bound by what my family thought I could achieve. I didn't need their apologies. I'd taken back my story, and no one could write it for me anymore. As I stepped out of the Bellevue Mansion, leaving my father, William, I summit in downtown Seattle ago, where James humiliated me before 1,000 spectators. I saw hopeful faces. A dream was unrealistic. But today I stand here not to say they were wrong, but to tell you, You don't need a legacy to create power. You don't need permission to make history. Build your own table and invite the world to sit at it. The hall erupted in applause, not polite, but a fierce wave of empathy, like a tide breaking. I shared my journey, from sleepless nights. It's about the kids learning through my platform, the users from underserved areas my family never noticed. When they say to overlook you longest are your greatest reason to succeed. As I finished, 3,000 people rose to their feet, their applause thundering. Major AI organizations, ones that once rejected me, emailed right after, proposing partnerships to expand my platform to Europe and Africa. A producer from TED called, inviting me to share my story on a global stage. Believe in me, but today I'll keep going because of you. As I stepped out of the AI Summit Hall in downtown Seattle, the applause of over 3,000 people still echoed in my mind. But standing on the rooftop of my Pioneer Square office, gazing at the city's twinkling lights, I, Emily Carter, didn't think about headlines or forced my father, William, to face the truth that he couldn't control my story. I thought about sleepless nights coding, countless rejections, and the team that turned my unrealistic dream into reality. And then, I thought about a family secret I'd only recently uncovered, a truth that changed how I saw everything. Have you ever uncovered a secret that cast your entire past in a new light, revealing you were stronger than you ever knew? Standing on this rooftop, Seattle's night breeze swirling around me, I recalled an old document I found in my who laughed, the ones who called me a failure. They can't inherit what I've built. They can't claim the light I ignited with sweat and tears. My startup isn't just a company. It's proof I could rise from the ashes, from secrets and betrayal, to forge an empire. I looked out at Puget Sound, Seattle's lights flickering like stars, each one a dream being guarded. I didn't need my family's forgiveness. I didn't need their spotlight. I'd lit my own sky, and it burned brighter than anything they ever tried to extinguish. But this story isn't just mine. It's for you, those watching, those doubted, hurt, or held back by the ones they loved. I stand here to tell you, don't let them define you. If someone calls you a failure, let them. Then build the door they have to knock on, the table they have to beg for a seat at, the empire they can't ignore. Share your story. Let the world hear your voice, because when you own your story, no one can take it away. I did it, from a betrayed girl to the woman on this rooftop, looking out at a Seattle I've changed. My story isn't over, but this ending I wrote, and it's mine. I turn back to the office, Seattle's lights behind me like a canvas of the future. The family secret was no longer a burden. It was fuel to push me further with bigger dreams and the belief that no one could stop me. Standing on the rooftop of my Pioneer Square office, gazing at Seattle's shimmering lights, I, Emily Carter, don't just see the journey behind me, but the paths ahead. Not only for me, but for everyone listening to this story. From a girl humiliated by my brother, James, before 1,000 people at TechWave, to the woman who forced my father, William, to face the truth that he couldn't control my dream, I've learned lessons etched into every step. The family secret that William sabotaged my MIT scholarship to protect James was the final spark that drove me to rewrite my own history. Today I want to share 3 practical lessons from my journey, not for you to admire me, but to take them, apply them, and write the next chapter of your story. Lesson 1. Silence is a weapon. When James turned me into a laughingstock at TechWave, when William called my dream unrealistic, I didn't argue. I didn't try to prove them wrong with words. I chose silence, not out of weakness, but because I knew actions speak louder than any speech. In my small Pioneer Square office, I coded, signed a $10 million deal, and built a startup valued at $1 billion. If someone doubts you, don't waste energy debating. Bow your head, work, and let your results speak. The next time you're underestimated, turn silence into a sword and use it to carve your name into history. Lesson 2. Find a community that lifts you up. My family didn't believe in me, but I found another family, Lynn, Min, An, and my team, who saw the light in my dream when no one else did. The party with them, amid pizza boxes and laughter, reminded me you don't need approval from those closest to you. Find people who'll stay up late with you, debug with you, and celebrate with you. They're the foundation of your empire. Ask yourself, who's your team? Who'll stand by you when the world turns its back? Lesson 3. Own your story. James and William tried to write my story, pricing my dream with mockery and betraying secrets. But I took it back, word by word, through late nights, victories, and a speech before 3,000 people in Seattle. Don't let anyone define who you are or what you can achieve. Pick up the pen, write your chapter, even if it starts from ashes. Your story is your most precious asset, and only you have the right to tell it. What story are you carrying in your heart? What made you doubt yourself, and how did you push through? I want to hear your story. Share it in the comments below. Tell me about the dream you're building, the people who tried to snuff it out, and how you're still going. Because every story you share is a new flame, lighting the way for others. I wrote my ending, from a betrayed girl to the woman on this rooftop, looking out at a Seattle I've changed. Now, it's your turn. Pick up the pen, write, and never let anyone take that pen from your hand.